the worst thing in my life, without any doubt, was the death of Holly. It's something, I think if I'm sitting on a park bench at 95 and someone asked me what was the worst thing that happened in my life, I would go back to this. I always remember reading about someone dying of a broken heart, and I never understood it. I actually felt a pain in my heart. It was like a lump that you couldn't get away. And I almost, well, I wouldn't say I died of a broken heart, but I felt so broken-hearted. The loss, the death of Holly.
It's 6 years now since Brian and Pat's baby daughter Holly was stillborn. The pregnancy had gone well, and there'd been no sign that anything might be wrong. Yet when Pat had a scan at 34 weeks, it showed that Holly had died. Nobody knew why, and the lack of any explanation has made grieving very hard.
After Holly died, it had such a devastating effect on the whole family. It affected the whole family. We all felt such overpowering grief, and I was quite surprised at how hard it was. One of the things I desperately wanted was for people to acknowledge that Holly had existed, because people never knew her. And I don't know, it's a case of what you've never had, you never miss, as far as they're concerned. People tended to think that with a grief like this, that both me and Brian would share it and we would grieve together. But in actual fact, we grieved so differently and separately that in the end we were driven apart by it for a while.
Pat would sit and she wanted to talk about it. And she would want to, and she would start going through her emotions. No, I couldn't. And we actually almost grew apart, because my favourite saying at the time was, anyway. As soon as she started to speak about it, I'd say, anyway, make a cup of tea. I'd go out to the pub. Not because I wanted to drown my sorrows, just I wanted to get away. And I just couldn't speak about it to Pat, but I couldn't speak about it to anybody else. I was bottling up all inside myself. She would get so frustrated with me not wanting to speak about it, I think. And also she'd be trying to help me. And she knew that the only way that she was going to help me was by speaking about it. But I couldn't face it.
One of the things that helped was being able to talk about Holly. I found that if people let me talk about her, it was like having a good cry. You know, I could release the emotions that were building up all the time. I felt I had to talk about her over and over again, going through the labour, the birth, the feelings afterwards, what we wanted for her, what should have been that didn't happen.
At first, Pat talked mostly to her mother, who didn't feel that she was helping, even though she badly wanted to.
I should have been able to help, or I felt I should have been able to help, but I didn't know how. I couldn't take the pain away. I couldn't give her the baby that she'd lost, my granddaughter. Pat and Brian have a wreath, and they take that to the cemetery for Holly's birthday. I get one, but I don't like to go to the cemetery with Pat and Brian. I can't explain that. My husband and I go ourselves at a different time from Pat and Brian to put it there. In fact, I don't think Pat and I have been to the cemetery at the same time, ever. We go separately. You know, when I see other little girls running about that would be the same age as Holly, I imagine how she might look now. But that's all, just imagine.
Every year we have a special day for my daughter, like we do for all the dead people. And on that day we remember and we say our sort of prayers, and we grieve just the same then. So grieving never stops from the point of view of parents.
Mohammed and Salim's baby daughter Rakia was born prematurely. That was 5 years ago, and since then they've had 2 more daughters. Rakia lived for 12 days in special care. She was their first baby.
I personally believe that because of the death of my daughter, and a few months afterwards, and even now, when we look back, it really brought my wife and I together, and especially the first couple of months, I could not believe how close we got. I mean, people always sort of take things for granted, but I think we must have been apart. But after the death, we were really, really close. We never ever sort of argued about it, but we could sort of discuss and try and see, you know, how we could sort of best cope, and then that always sort of helped us from that point of view. And we used to sit and talk about it. She's a daughter of mine. I've got 3 daughters, not 2 daughters. These 2 I've got, plus Rukia. Rukia is the eldest. Will always be the eldest, and will be remembered as the eldest. She's not here, but she's still my daughter, and we still carry on. And she's part of the family. Whenever anybody asks me how many daughters have you got, I never say I've got 2. I say 3 daughters. The eldest one died.
Jane and Terry also lost their first baby, Joshua, when Jane was 27 weeks pregnant. It was discovered that Joshua had a congenital heart abnormality, and they were advised to end the pregnancy.
When my milk came in, a few days after I came home, and I remember standing in the doorway, and I had a nightshirt on, and I was just crying, and the tears were pouring down my face, and the milk was pouring down my shirt, and I just thought, is this what I've come to? You know, I used to go out to work, I used to be able to cope with my life, and I couldn't do anything, even any sort of household task or anything seemed immensely difficult and not worth it. Why was I bothering with all these things when the only important thing had gone away? I didn't like my body at all after Joshua was born. Somehow, when you've had a baby and a baby that lives, you can look at your body and know it's produced something. But I just looked at my body and it looked like the picture of failure. It was saggy, I had a floppy tummy. It just looked like a complete disaster area. And I didn't want to look at it, so I just put myself in completely shapeless sort of things. And I didn't want to bother to do anything that would tone up my muscles again. And I didn't want Terry to come anywhere near me, or touch me, or have any physical contact with me. I just wanted to shut off this piece of equipment that had failed so miserably.
I think I was feeling right from the start that I had to play the male supportive role, that I had to be strong, and that the way I showed myself to Jane had to be strong in organising everything that was happening around us. But there was a big problem with that, which I think I found out later on, was that Jane wanted me to show something, which I didn't think was the right thing to do, and therefore that led to some sort of problems between us as time went by. The things that helped were sitting down and talking about it with Jane in almost a more loving way than a disastrous way. It was talking about the feelings and talking about the time before he was born, not just the events that happened at the time. We sat with a group and talked about our feelings, and to be quite frank, I didn't realise how strong my feelings would come out at the time.
I remember when I started to smile at things again and started to laugh. And to begin with, that was very hard. Every time I laughed, I immediately stopped because I felt that I was betraying the memory of my baby. But gradually, I had periods where I wasn't remembering all the time. There would be bits during my day when I could actually focus on something else. And then it would suddenly come back in a great wash over me, what had happened. And I'd think, God, I forgot him. I forgot him for an hour. How could I do that? How could I possibly do that after all that I've been through? But gradually the periods got longer and I didn't feel quite so guilty about it. I began to be able to rationalise the fact that life was actually going to go on and that I had to move forward, and that moving forward didn't mean that I was forgetting him.
Adrian and Jane's son, Ricky, was born prematurely 3 years ago. For some time there was hope that he'd survive. He lived for 5 months on a ventilator, but then he died without ever coming home from hospital. For Adrian, Ricky's death has been especially hard because they won't be able to have any more children.
Ricky was my first baby with Adrian. Adrian desperately wanted to have a little boy. I feel guilty that I've let Adrian down. I've got 2 girls by my first marriage. Adrian hasn't got any children, and I feel that I've let Adrian down.
I just felt such a terrible, tense feeling inside me. Almost as though, I want to smash something up simply because, I'd lost my son. And particularly when I see other people with kids of theirs, and it really does rub it in. And I know it sounds terrible because I feel really happy for people who've got children, but, at times it really does get to me and just get so angry and you feel like you need some sort of release. But I'm not the sort of person that can just go to other people and discuss my problems with them, and luckily enough I don't go smashing anything up, so I just work it out myself. Usually I throw myself right into work, I'm a bit of a workaholic, and that does help. That gets rid of all my tension. With Jane and the kids, I know I'll go on to have a lovely life, but I know it sounds horrible in a way, but my life will never be as good as perhaps what I hoped it would be. Because one thing, even as a youngster, that I dreamt of was bringing up a son on my own and, doing the normal things that a father would like to do with his son, playing football, basically bringing up a boy to be a good, caring person and, just growing up with a young lad.
Both Jane and Adrian and Jane's 2 daughters, JC and Donna, were with Ricky when he died. And since then, the 2 girls have been able to talk a lot about their brother and how they feel about his death. Jane's pregnancy was a lovely time for them, and JC, who was 9 at the time, had planned how things would be when her baby brother was born.
I was worried about my mum in the first place, and she told me that she was pregnant, and I was so happy, and I knew it was going to be a baby boy. And I loved the name Ricky Sean Porton. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. And I was going to teach him to climb trees and stuff. All the boy stuff you do, play football and all that. It was going to be brilliant, but when he was born prematurely, I took it for granted and I thought he was going to come home. I didn't spend that much time with him when he was at hospital because I said to myself, he's going to come home and then I'll spend time with him. But I was too late and I regret not spending time with him. I was going to be the best big sister in the world. But he never came home.
Donna was 6 when Ricky died, and at first she felt very guilty about his death. Like a lot of young children who lose a baby brother or sister, she felt sure she'd been responsible.
The worst feeling was really me, because I'd actually felt that it was me who made Ricky die. Because when I'd actually kissed him, his heartbeat started going.
A year later, it helped Donna when she made a special scrapbook about Ricky. She put in a story she'd written, drawings, photos, a poem. and she drew a picture of the bedroom she'd hoped to share with Ricky.
Well, Ricky's bed would be near the window and near the radiator so that he wouldn't get too cold or too hot.
Yeah.
And his wardrobe, he would be capable of opening it, and mine he wouldn't be able to. My favourite memory of Ricky was when he put his thumb in his mouth. It was just before he died.
Just feel an overwhelming feeling of pride, because he may not have lived long, but you know, he certainly gave his best shot, and in the end it was just purely down to bad luck that he died. No, but I'll always love him and always full of pride for him.
Delia's baby, Eliza, was born with an abnormality that meant she couldn't live. Doctors said she'd die immediately, but Eliza lived for 8 days. Delia found her death very hard to accept.
I just couldn't believe that she wasn't going to live. I think the question was why? Why did it have to happen to me? First of all, I blamed the father, blamed Eliza's father. I thought it was his fault. Then it was my fault. Then it was both our faults. What did I do to cause it? I must have caused it. Then he must have caused it. There was a lot of questions. Told the doctor, asked the doctor, we told them what I'd done. Did this cause it? Did I, you know? They said no, there was no explanation for it. Because I wanted an answer for what people to explain to me what had caused, what she had was so devastating. As far as I was concerned, there must have been an answer. But they said there wasn't. I did want another baby. But then I found the time wasn't right. Because having another baby straight away, I'd be trying to replace the baby. Replace, you know, that would be Eliza, and it wouldn't be Eliza. It would be another baby, totally different. So I thought it was best not to rush into that. When people were taking pictures of her, and the flash of the camera, she opened her eyes. She used to flash her eyes open. And she never opened her eyes for anyone else, only for when they were taking a picture. And one day she opened her eyes for me.
Daffodil and Enos lost their first baby, a girl they called Paris, when Daffodil was 18 weeks pregnant. Now she's expecting their next baby, and this pregnancy has been a very anxious time for both of them.
It's been hard, I think, because every day you think that something's going to go wrong. No matter what anyone else says, you just sort of think, when you're first pregnant, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't want anyone to know until I got to a certain time, and then when you had told them, I asked most people not to ask me about it, just let it go by. And then when people do feel a bit more confident about asking you, they ask you about, well, is baby moving and things like that, and suddenly you think, no, it's not, and you sort of think, now something's wrong again. And every day, there's something wrong. I know there's something wrong. Every time I go for a scan, I'm searching for the scan, the viewer, for the heartbeat. I'm not looking for anything else. I just want to see that the heart's beating. I don't think once you've lost a baby, you take anything if you ever get pregnant again, you don't take it for granted. You take it week by week, day by day, and just just hopefully it gets through.
From the moment we found out, I shut off. I didn't want to get too happy about it. I didn't actually even begin to plan and think about it. And on occasions we argued about that, the fact that I seemed so disinterested about the whole thing. Now I'm getting used to the idea. Now we're just a few weeks away now, and now I can afford to actually even think or consider that I might be a daddy. It's extraordinary that it has that effect on you, that for 99% of the time you hear someone's pregnant and there's a baby at the end of the pregnancy, and you can think of doing all the things that you would do with a baby. Just that one loss changes your entire outlook on not only your pregnancies, but everyone else you know as well who might be expecting. It colours everything.
All families grieve differently, and people find different ways to ease the pain and hurt. But somehow, and at some time, everyone needs to express their grief. For Jo, writing's been a great help. She and her husband Jeremy lost their first baby, Jason. He lived for just 11 days.
There were a number of times I just felt I was going out of my mind with the grief. I would sit in the evening and I just felt so low, so depressed and so lost that I began to wonder what was left and what was next. And it was suggested that it might be helpful to write something down, and I also felt it was a nice thing to do because Jason only lived for 11 days, and if I could capture all his moments by writing it down, it would be really wonderful. So I wrote a big story about him and how I felt, and it helped a lot.
Like Jo's parents have read it and her sister have read it. They could actually, after reading it, appreciate some of the feelings that we went through. The emptiness, the sadness, the big hole in our life. Once I start reading, I have to read it all the way through. I can't just read a chapter. And I know what the end is, and I still halfway through the book go to the end to see if there's a different ending. And it's still the same ending. And I can't believe that Jo and I went through what we did and survived. Because in the midst of it, you don't think you're going to survive.
On the bit of paper within the covers of the book.
These parents have come on a day designed to help them think about themselves and their baby, and write down some of their thoughts and feelings. It's being run by a writer and a counsellor.
And then come up very, very slowly, bringing your head.
The day also includes some exercise and relaxation. Grief is often felt in physical ways, and exercise can help.
And I just shake.
Just keep going round. That's enough. Keep the little body moving, the little waist. Keep the feet going. What's remembering? And now both arms. Now we need to cool down.
Perhaps the most important part of the day is just having the time to remember and being with people who understand. At the end of the day, parents talk together about what they've remembered and written about.
Yes, I found, when I had Samantha, the week we were in hospital, it snowed Samantha was born on the Tuesday and it snowed on the Wednesday night, and I was awake during the night, and I can remember having the headphones on, listening to the radio. I couldn't believe the chaos that London and surrounding place was in. I'm just watching it fall so silently outside the window.
I mean, there was another thing that I remembered that I'd forgotten. The first thing Jenny said when I told her we had a daughter. Do you remember? We won't have to change the bedroom carpet then, because we had a dusty pink carpet. And I'd forgotten that.
I bought my wife some flowers and I'd left them with the nurses. Because there'd be loads of bouquets and not enough vases for them to go in, I bought what I think it's called a posy bowl, where it's all arranged for you and you just pick it up from the florists. And I now can't think about buying flowers without thinking about, I don't want to buy a posy bowl because it reminds me of Paul.
Bridget and Mike have a son called David, who's now 2 years old. But David had a twin brother, Sean, who died.
My struggle, I think, has always been the fact that that David is alive, but Sean is dead. And it's very difficult because sometimes you think, gosh, if I could grieve for the two, then it would, not that it would finish, but you could actually grieve. But I also have the joy of David, who is a constant reminder of also a very, very traumatic loss. When you said a word or whatever, I knew instinctively what I wanted to do because I'd never actually written his name. And that kind of said that again, although you have grieved, it actually brings it all back because it's something that I will never do. I'll never write a letter to him, or I'll never see a birth certificate of him or anything. So, but a year ago I would have written it in very dark colours with dark clouds and it would have been raining. But today I chose very bright colours. And the sun is shining through.
It's taken time for these parents to grieve, a longer time than any of them expected.
Your mind starts to think of other things. When you're first learning this typewritten way to risk.
Now they're able to remember their baby with less painful feelings. None of them will forget their baby, and nor would they ever want to.
I remember Joshua now as a baby that's not with us anymore, a very tiny baby, and somebody who was very precious. And I think you can't go through an experience like that without it changing your life in some way.
Especially the first anniversary was very difficult, very painful, and it just brought back all the sad memories and all the feelings that we went through at the very beginning of Holly's death. But now, it is easier. It's not as painful, and we tend to look back at the good memories we've got. We're proud that we had her. We'll never forget her. You forget about all the really painful feelings. They're not as intense. They've got less and less. It's getting easier as time goes by.
She was there for some time, if not for, if not for long. And I think it just sort of made me not so scared of dying myself, actually. Then I sort of thought, well, if she's somewhere around, then maybe one day when I die, I'll see her.
I think if you could put your life all over again and you could change something, that would be what I'd change. I'd give anything to have her back.
saw you in heaven, I must be strong and carry on, 'cause I know I don't belong here in heaven. Would you hold my hand if I saw you in heaven? Would you help me stay?